Welcome to the 4Q podcast. My name is Sheena. I have a Bachelor of Psychology, Masters of Counselling, and Masters of Social Work. My aim is to normalise rather than pathologise life. And in this podcast, we talk all things therapy, women's mental health, leadership, and business. So if you're ready to learn some tips, tricks, and hear some amazing stories to really amplify your life and your business, let's get into it. Welcome again to the 4Q podcast. Are you approaching life from fear or freedom? That's the topic of today's podcast. It's an interesting concept that I've been exploring a little bit deeper around, again, this idea of, am I living my life from fear or freedom? And how to tell. So this could be asking this question, am I working my job from fear or freedom? Am I in a relationship with this person from fear or freedom? So again, if you were to break that down a little bit further, let's say you're in a relationship and it's feeling good, but it's not aligning. You might want to ask yourself, am I actually being with someone because of the fear of being alone, rather than being with someone because they bring out fun or freedom in me? It's a really interesting thing to look at, a perspective to look at as you go deeper and deeper in this. Again, you might work in a job and you're not loving it, but you're not leaving or doing anything to change it because there's a fear that there isn't anything better. Rather than choosing a job or a career because of the freedom to choose something that you want to do. Again, money. You can either approach money from a place of fear or freedom. So I guess what I'm finding is I've been working a lot, as many of you know, with a lot of female leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners, and I've worked with women from all levels of income, from all places in life. So I've worked with women who've gone from high socioeconomic to low socioeconomic, low socioeconomic to high socioeconomic, and I've worked with women who've gone from high to high, or from low all the way to the highest, as you can imagine, back down to low. And again, not just in income, but in career, in, even content creation. So I've worked with some incredible content creators who've gone viral and been very popular for a while, and that's faded out. And again, there's sort of like an income spike that can come with that, or just freebies that come with that, and then that goes away. But I think a big thing driving some of this is, am I coming from a place of fear or freedom? So one way we need to untangle this is really understanding that the brain has two motivations within it. The motivation to seek pleasure and the motivation to avoid pain. So again, we know that this is backed by the neurological pathways in your brain. Pleasure seeking, fear avoidance. And I think often the media really play well into that fear, and even our families come from a place of fear. Get that government job, otherwise, you might not have security, right? Because we're coming from a place of, during, World War II, all of that, like our grandparents and our great-grandparents would have told our parents and their grandchildren, generationally. Back then, having a government job was super important because, with all the war and the depression and the economics, actually having a government job back then was really good thing. It meant security. It meant that when times were tough, you still had a job, you still had food on the table, roof over your head. They really did take care of government employees back then. But is that holding you back now? So I know some incredible health professionals in government jobs, because for many health professionals, including myself, so social workers, psychologists, physios, occupational therapists, even doctors, there's this thing of getting in, and you have to actually be pretty good to get in. There's sort of this okay, that's the gold standard. If you're in, whatever. And once you're in, you're in. There's also that saying, once you're in, you're in. But they end up having what we call the golden handcuffs of, they tell themselves, okay, now that I'm on 100 a year, 120 a year, even 140 a year sometimes, how can I possibly earn that working somewhere else? And what does that mean for me? Again, can you hear the fear within that of, okay, there's nothing better than this. I might work really long hours and work in a really reactive system. It's burning me out. It's not making me happy. I'm putting out fires constantly. I'm not working within my framework, and that I want to be proactive about whatever industry I'm in. Rather than a freedom-based perspective of, let's say I actually ask myself, what's the lifestyle I want to live? Not basing it on money, because I think so many of us think once I'm earning 200K, I can have a good lifestyle. But you don't even know what your lifestyle is supposed to look like. So the story I often share is that there's this stand-up paddleboarder in central Queensland up here where I live, and he lives the most abundant lifestyle. Ocean view, wakes up to fresh organic food every single day, has a casual lifestyle, only works a few hours a week teaching stand-up paddleboarding, which he loves, and his dog is there every single day. Now, that is $1 million lifestyle. He's got $1 million views. People would pay a mint to live by the ocean and have good food every day. But he's doing it at a fraction of the cost, basically less than what most people would earn in 1 year. And so I think that's the trap that people get trapped into, is that instead of actually asking myself and coming from a place of freedom, what do I want out of this life? What do I want my lifestyle to look like? What do I want my family to look like? What do I want my relationships to look like? What would a day in the life of my ideal life look like? My ideal week, my ideal year? What would it all look like? And how can I recreate that? And oftentimes we can recreate parts of it for far less than what we think, if we change our way of looking at things from fear to freedom. So again, some people go, I want to live by the ocean, but the only way that I can do that is if I'm a millionaire. Because there's this fear of, if I don't own a house and if I rent a house, somehow I'm failing, or somehow I'm not going to give back to my children, or whatever that might look like. Again, can you see that they're living their life from a fear-based paradigm, not having enough, lack perspective, as opposed to a freedom-based paradigm of, how can I actually make this work? And this is possible for me. And, I think that's the thing, is that we hold back in life so often when we're coming from fear. And a lot of fear is, again, based around scarcity, money. So again, people are scared to rent sometimes because there's this idea that you only have to own, and owning is the only way, and all of that. But I guess something that I've learnt is that sometimes that's not the best financial decision. And actually, if you rented, but you put the money that you would get from a mortgage into something that's going to earn you money, like a business or an asset or stocks or whatever it might be, that can be a better financial investment for you. So it's really interesting how different things are playing out like that because of fear or freedom. So I wanted to have this conversation today because, again, like I mentioned, I've worked with women from all walks of life, and I myself haven't come from the most privileged background. Privileged in the way that my parents had an education, but we had feast or famine growing up. And when I say feast, I'm not talking high socioeconomic, right? But I'm lucky enough that my parents, we owned our house growing up and things like that. I have a lot of friends who were in housing commission houses, and I didn't have to experience that and constantly moving because of that and all of that. But also, if you're here, and you may not, you should know, but I'm also a mixed race person and a woman of colour. So even though I'm half white, I haven't had the privileges of looking white that come along with it. And I have experienced racism growing up, and that feeling of never feeling like I fit in, and people sort of making assumptions about the way that I am and how I live my life based on how I look as opposed to who I am, and that's been really tricky. And then also even my own family having assumptions on how I should live my life, even though I'm mixed race, even though I'm born in Australia, even though I was raised in Australia, went to public schools and all of that. But I've had the privilege from my parents were valuing education and all of that, that they supported me while I went to university. And I went to the University of Queensland, which is one of the top 50 universities in the world, very privileged. And I got to see and experience things I did not even know existed, like the clickiness of private school girls and people rocking up in a BMW, right? I had a janky old ass car. And so, but I was still dressing the part. I felt this need to try to fit in. But, realizing when I was meeting these people and their families that they were having conversations that I was not privy to. Conversations about wealth and knowledge and growth and all of that. And even those girls from private schools and privileged backgrounds sometimes are being left out of the conversation, because even for, my own family and my dad, he never talked about finances or wealth or what I want out of life with me, but he's had those conversations with my brothers and my husband. So, that's really interesting as well. And so again, they're having different conversations, but even these girls, they've got the men in their life running the show as opposed to them sort of having the knowledge. And again, that ends up leading to fear of, I can't leave this relationship because I don't know the finances. He's the breadwinner. I don't know how to manage this. I don't have the skills. So again, coming from a place of fear or freedom, am I in this because I feel like I can't do it on my own? That's fear. Am I in this because I just choose to be here? I know I could do it on my own, but it's nice to have someone around. Freedom. I hope this is clicking something big in you today, because it really has clicked something for me in that we need to have these conversations as women, regardless of what privileges you do and do not have. All women from all walks of life need these conversations and need to know that, what does my ideal life look like? Because your ideal life could be 50 grand a year, could be done with 200 grand a year. Some people's ideal life might look more like 500 grand a year, a million a year. But you don't know unless you figure that out. And again, your core values, what's important to me, right? And it's not just some mythical kind of bullshit thing of like, oh yeah, that's just some wishy-washy dream, but nobody really gets to live that. Again, that's a fear thing. Freedom-based would tell you that anything is possible as long as I choose that for myself. I give myself the freedom to choose what I want. Because are you doing what you should and must do, or are you doing what you want to do? Again, in the therapy world, we often challenge people on this concept of shoulds and musts that gets ingrained into our psyche. Shoulds and musts. You should be a wife. You should look a certain way. Tall, skinny, white, blonde hair, blue eyes. You should act the part. You should be fit. You should be rich. You should be this. You should be that. I must be doing these things. I must have a meal on the table every night. I must have a home cooked this. I must have that. All of that is just conditioning that we have to undo so that we're not living from a place of fear, but actually a place of freedom. So these are really important conversations that we need to have. And if you've been following me, I'm sort of mentioning that therapists don't often talk about this because, again, money can bring up taboo stuff for people. There's associated with greed or exploitation or the dark side of capitalism and all of that. But what I'm challenging you is that you can absolutely be a multi-millionaire in an ethical way. You might not even need that. Your ideal lifestyle might not even require that, but you've got to ask yourself what that is. And so that's why in all of my programs, whether you're a health professional and you're working with me over in my business coaching business, or whether you're a female leader, entrepreneur, or a business owner and you're working me from a personal development perspective, these are the conversations we need to have. These are the things that we work on in the beginning, is really figuring out some of these core pieces that actually change over time. Sometimes I'll work with someone and we'll do some stuff around their ideal lifestyle at the beginning. And then 6 months later, they actually go, you know what? I just want time with my kids. That's what it really boils down to. I actually thought that I wanted to do this X, Y, Z, but actually what it is that I want to work in a way where I can be there for them, because they're not going to be there always. And, my parents missed out on that with me and all of that sort of stuff, whatever that looks like. It can change very fast. Or you actually go, I want friends in my life. I've realized that I've neglected my friendships and I actually miss that community, and I want to build a community around me once again. So I think that's these things that can grow and change, but you need to start somewhere. And so if this is clicking for you, if you're going, yes, I can feel this identity shift that needs to happen. It's more than psychological. It's more than a mindset. It's an identity shift of, I'm going to choose me. Because at the end of the day, you can take this as positive or not so positive, but you've got to be the one to back you up. You've got to be the one to choose you, because nobody else is going to choose you first over them. You've got to choose you at some point. And so I would love for you to connect with me on this topic. We're having a wealth masterclass. And so if you're listening to this at the time of the recording, you can actually attend with me live this Thursday. Or if you're listening this back later, not at the time of this recording, you can absolutely access that wealth masterclass. If you DM me wealth, or if you comment on any of my posts or my reels wealth, you'll have access to that wealth masterclass, where we're going to be talking about this from two perspectives. Wealth creation masterclass. And I'm going to link it below as well if you want to have access to it. But this wealth creation masterclass, two perspectives. we're going to talk about what does wealth look like to you. How do I even know where to start with what wealth looks like to me in terms of not just financial, but a wealthy life? Like, how do I know that I'm meeting my freedom metrics? So we're going to talk about that. And then we're also going to talk about the 4-stage strategy that Robert Kiyosaki has shared around how to generate wealth, financial wealth. Because at the end of the day, financial wealth does equal freedom, and we need to let go of the money mindset stuff that tells us that money is greedy or unethical. Because at the end of the day, we can fill other people's cups once we're overflowing, but not from an empty cup. And that's not just an emotional analogy, but that's a financial analogy too. We can give back to our communities when we're stable on our footing financially. I've seen this with a lot of the high earning women that I work with, the foundations they've set up and how they're, doing things from a place of charity and kindness, and not just a tax deduction, right? There's plenty of ways to deduct tax without giving back. So it's a really interesting topic, a really interesting conversation, but let's choose freedom over fear. If you love this episode, share it with someone who maybe needs to hear it, or if it clicked something for you, share it in your stories, tag me. I'd love to hear from you. It always lights my soul on fire when I see the shifts happening, or when one of you mentions that it clicks something for you. It really does warm my heart, because this has been a lonely road for me, becoming the person that I need to be and who you're going to be too. You have ebbs and flows where it feels like you're on top of a mountain and nothing could tear you down. And then you have a bit of a pitfall, and it's lonely and it's scary and you don't know what's around the corner. But I'm so glad that you're here and you're taking the time for yourself and you're becoming part of my community, and we're doing this together. So thank you again, and I will see you in the next episode of the 4Q podcast. Bye for now.